called Mrs. Holdsworth, arriving home. "I'm sorry I'm so late. I'm afraid you had to wait for your lunch." There was no answer. "Harry," she said again. "Are you there?" "'Fraid not," said a voice. "Tibble, tibble, sawyer." Propped up on the kitchen table was a note. "Mum, Mad rang, going to London to fetch him back for tea. How about making some American brownies? Love, Harry." Now try not to worry, she told herself. After all, he's 11 years old and pretty sensible. He's often gone, and without me on the train. She got out the double dozen. "Oh dear," she said it aloud. "Oh, I hope to goodness he'll be all right."
Harry, in fact, was quite all right, only a bit out of breath. He had run all the way to Maze Hill Station, hoping that there would soon be a train for Charing Cross, and there was, and he was on it. Some uncles and aunts had given him quite a lot of money for his birthday, so that he had plenty to spare for the return fare. He had also put on his anorak in case it turned very cold, his wellies in case it rained heavily, and was carrying his satchel to put Mad in case you had to buy tickets for parrots. He was so excited that the journey passed in a flash. In no time at all, it seemed, he was hurrying along the Strand, dodging his way through the crowds of pedestrians. There was only one individual I'm interested in, thought Harry, one smallish, short-legged grey bird. He entered Trafalgar Square to find it filled with thousands upon thousands of smallish, short-legged grey birds, cooing and strutting and bowing and pecking and squabbling, drinking from fountains, perching on the lions, covering the paving stones in one great slate-coloured, bustling blanket. For a moment Harry's heart sank. How would he ever find Mad amongst this multitude? He sat down on a bench while the pigeons chuckled and gobbled around his feet, and stared unhappily at the column, pointing like a colossal finger to the London sky. His gaze was drawn down the mighty pillar, up to the pedestal on its top, where stood the figure of the little Admiral, cocked hat on his head, his one and only hand resting upon the hilt of his sword. But
what was that shape that sat upon the epauletted shoulder of Horatio, Viscount Nelson, the Duke of Bront, KBC, Vice Admiral of Blue? That was no silly pigeon. "Mad, mad, mad!" and everywhere people stopped and stared at this yelling, dancing small boy who shouted endlessly the word that it seemed to them he was. In the watch, the solitary bull came gliding rather clumsily down from the heights and pitched awkwardly upon the boy's shoulder, and shuffled sideways to nibble gently at the lobe of its ear. As the
boy stopped his shouting and stood still, only raising one hand to stroke with the fingertips that round grey head, while all around the pigeons settled again and the noise of their cooing once more filled the square. After that everything went like clockwork. They couldn't talk much, there were too many people about, in the crowded streets, on the packed platform, on the journey through Waterloo, and at the Elephant and Castle, on the way to Greenwich and home. It didn't matter to either of them. They were together again. There would be all the time in the world to talk later. Harry managed, at a moment when no one seemed to be looking at the strange pair, to mutter his idea for using the satchel, and the parrot popped inside it to avoid the ticket collectors. But otherwise Harry carried his Mad in triumph. Up the hill from the railway station they went in the gathering dusk, and skirted the edge of the park, and turned up at last to Unduly Road. "Nearly there," cried Harry, pointing. "Look, Mad, 137, that's our house." And then they were at the door, and Harry's mother was opening it and hugging him and stroking Madison's feathers and hurrying them to the kitchen and plying them with delicious, squidgy, nutty American brownies and endless questions, and they were still all talking away 19 to the dozen when Harry's father arrived home, astounded to see Madison, who had then to tell the whole story of his adventure all over again. Until at last Mr. Holdsworth looked at his watch and said, "Mad, nearly time for the 6 o'clock news," and they all smiled, because one of Madison's tricks was to balance on top of the TV set, swing his tail up and his head down, and press the on-off switch with the hook of his beak. "Sure thing, Mr. Holdsworth, sir," said Madison. "I'm out of touch with what's been going on. No knowing what might have happened while I've been away." And he got down to the floor and waddled off along the passage to the sitting room. The smile that had been on Harry's face suddenly changed to a look of horror. Not once all day had he thought about Fwedi, not till that instant when a combination of what Madison had just said and where he was going filled him with sudden panic. He should have told Mad, explained it all, promised to get rid of the stupid thing right away. "Mad!" he cried. "Hang on a minute!" And he dashed out of the kitchen. "What's biting you, Harry?" asked Madison, turning to face him in the doorway of the sitting room. Harry sought desperately for a last-minute means of softening the blow. "Listen, Mad, I should have told you. It just never crossed my mind. I was so excited at seeing you and hearing all your news, I just never thought to say it was a present from Dad. I never wanted it. I'm sorry." "Terribly, frightfully, dreadfully sorry," said a voice from the sitting room. In the silence that followed, you could have heard a parrot's pin feather drop. Then Madison turned and walked in. He looked up at his cage. Fwedi looked down. Helplessly, Harry looked on. Madison gave a low, long whistle. Fwedi replied with a short, high screech. Harry was tongue-tied. "Come on, Harry boy, make with the introductions," said Madison pleasantly. He's called Fwedi," mumbled Harry. "Fwedi, this is Madison." "Blistering hot, what?" said Fwedi. "He doesn't talk sense," said Harry hastily. "Honestly, Mad, he's an idiotic bird. We'll get rid of him. We'll sell him. Straight away. Tomorrow we'll take him to the pet shop. Dad won't mind, I'm sure." His parents came into the room. "Dad won't mind what?" his father said. "Hey, Mad, you haven't switched the news on." Terribly sorry," said Madison in Fwedi's high, affected voice. "What a silly poet I am!" And to the amazement of the Holdsworth, both the birds suddenly burst out laughing.